So initially we've been saying October, but we wanted to align with our other SB1 programs and have the members of the Equity Advisory Committee be a part of the application scoring process, which will probably add about a month on the back end. So adoption right now, we are saying is not going to be October, but December 2023.
Okay, so I think that gives us a little bit more time, at least for the agencies. And so Mike, I do invite you to get Region 9 involved and figure out a process. We are just putting what the requirements are for Protect, and that's all we really can do. But we can surely then give you a couple more months, because I do not want us to recommend a project that has not received approval from the Secretary.
Yep, makes sense.
Thank you, Teresa. Oh, okay.
Okay, so I'm not seeing any other hands raised at this time, and no questions have come in.
Excellent. Okay, let's scroll down to page 9, section 7, funding source program cycle. At the last stakeholder workshop, we mentioned that we heard the governor's proposed budget had recommended, due to the deficit of the general fund, swapping the 148 million one-time appropriation from the to the LTCAP from the state general fund to the state highway account. That change isn't set in stone yet, and it won't be until the budget is passed, but we've heard that this swap was very, very, very likely to happen, and so we wanted the guidelines to reflect that. And as such, there will be, what we've heard is that with that swap, there would be an additional year added to the one-time appropriation for allocation and liquidation. So rather than the state appropriation needing to be liquidated by June 2027, we would have until June 2028. And we can go down to the next page, Alika, page 10. This is more of the same that we saw earlier, but we put it here as well. So we wanted to clarify about the needing to notify the U.S. Secretary for capacity activities. But then also, because of all of the requirements for Protect, we thought about the direction we had for the total cycle capacity, funding capacity for new capacity projects. So what am I trying to say? The previous version, we had said no more than 40% of the available funding for the cycle would be for those activities. Now we have decided to just do 40% of the Protect funds with all of the requirements that Protect has for capacity improvements. We didn't feel it was right to not have the same for the state funding. So instead of having that across the whole bucket, it would just be for Protect. Because in the end, at the end of the day, this really is a Protect program. It's not a state program, despite the one-time appropriation. So for cycle 1, capacity funding would be limited to 59.4 million. I'll pause here for any questions. And then if not, we can skip to the next page, page 11.
I'm not seeing any raised hands or questions.
Okay. So we can scroll down to page 11, screening criteria. It looks like a lot. There's a lot of purple here that wasn't there before, but that was because when we looked at the screening criteria, it wasn't specific enough. We wanted to have more information so applicants would know exactly what was required of them, rather than having them sort of guess and hope that their answer sort of hit the mark. So for screening criteria A, which is the identification of at least one projected climate threat, which is in SB 198 as a requirement for all funded projects. We have identified the one of the two climate tools applicants can use, so CalAdapt or Our Coast, Our Future, which utilizes Cosmos sea level rise data. So we want applicants to provide a screenshot or a screen printout of that data, whichever of the two tools that they're using, just to sort of show that the climate threat that their application is responding to, or that the project nomination will enhance the resiliency against, is indeed the climate threat that is being used and supported in their application. Same with B, identification of the climate vulnerable, under-resourced, or underserved communities in connection to the project nomination. We are asking for, so this is a bit of a change. Let me backtrack a tiny bit. Scroll down a little bit, Alika, to keep going right there. So one of our questions outstanding that we had for FHWA was, because Protect is, sorry, forgot the word, covered under the Justice 40 initiative from President Biden, we wanted to ask, and we asked FHWA, can we substitute California tools for determining disadvantaged communities for the federal tools, which are identified as being necessary for Protect? And FHWA let us know, no, the California tools would not be sufficient to demonstrate that 40% of Protect funds is going to disadvantaged communities. Not a big deal. We're hoping this is not too onerous for applicants. So all we will be asking for applicants to show is whether or not the project nomination meets the threshold for federal disadvantaged communities using one of the two tools specified in the appendix, and whether the project meets the threshold for California definition of disadvantaged. We are not requiring applicants meet both of those, but we do want to know, is the priority population associated with your project captured in the federal and or the state tool? Well, and then only one of those tools needs to reflect that indeed that community is associated with the project. I realize that might be a little confusing, but we are hoping that this will give us an easier time on the back end, looking at where we are going to be allocating monies, because 40% of all of the Protect money dispersed needs to flow to disadvantaged communities. And since California tools aren't allowable, we'll have to have applicants give us a yes or a no for both of those, but only need to meet one of the tools. I'll pause there for any questions.
Rebecca, we did get one question asking if they provided a link to the CalAdapt tool page and they just wanted confirmation that that's correct. So maybe that's something we can share in the chat.
Yeah, yes,
or
that is.
After the workshop, if that's easier.
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah, we can do that. But and also the guidelines, Appendix C has a list of the climate tools that are approved for this program. So it identifies the two federal tools that we want applicants to use, and then there are numerous state definitions or tools that can be used to find the climate vulnerable, under-resourced, underserved communities. And I want everyone to note, the federal tools don't specify climate vulnerable, under-resourced, et cetera. They only specify disadvantaged, but SB 198 asks that every project, or requires that every project funded through LTCAP benefit a climate vulnerable community. So those two terms are a bit interchangeable in this section, but for our purposes, as long as those communities are reflected in one or both tools, and applicants let us know which tool that is. and identify, you know, whether or not it's in, sorry, I'm confusing myself. Applicants need to let us know if it's in the federal and if it's in the state, and it only needs to comply with one of those. But the definitions that we've had for this section are pretty interchangeable. So don't let that trip you up when you are applying or answering the screening criteria. So if we scroll down a bit to C. So SB 198 has requirements that all projects funded through LTCAP meet or demonstrate consistency with a host of documents. So regional, the RTP, SES, and a few others. So for the first one, for the RTP SES, we are looking for confirmation that the proposed project is consistent with the current and approved RTP, and if applicable, SES. And then we would just want a link to that document. For number 2, C2, this is a requirement from SB 198 that the project nomination is consistent with the Governor's Office of Emergency Services Adaptation Planning Guide. Will you scroll down just a little bit, Alika, please? Oh.
Sorry, did I go too far?
No, there's a missing bullet. So I'll have to add that in, but the missing bullet under 2 is just, you know, oh no, it's right, we took it out. So for this one, we're actually leaving it very open-ended for applicants. The Adaptation Planning Guide was developed for projects or plans looking for climate resiliency specifically for transportation or just projects in general. We don't know how familiar applicants might be with this. And so we're leaving up to the applicant to interpret what consistency looks like for them. This might change in the second cycle once we get a better understanding of everyone's comfortability or familiarity with this planning document. And so this one won't have a bullet. This is for applicants to respond to in any way that they find appropriate. Scrolling down to 3, page 12, SB 198 directs that projects funded through LTCAP meet the climate resiliency and environmental justice goals of the region. And so here we've specified that we would like applicants to briefly describe how their project nomination furthers those goals, targets, or performance measures of a current and approved plan. Applicants can choose any one of the following to respond to, or more than one if they deem necessary. So the RTP, the SES, general plan, Indigenous community plan, local hazard mitigation plan, or any standalone climate adaptation or climate action plan. And then again, similar to the RTP SES, we ask applicants to link to that plan if a link exists. And then the fourth, again, this is an SB 198 requirement that projects funded through also meet any other sort of catch-all, any other regional or local climate adaptation plans and reports. And so here again, if applicable, for number 4, we ask applicants to identify and briefly describe how the project nomination furthers those goals, performance measures, or targets of any of the other plans. And so we again ask applicants to include a link so we can see those. Scrolling down to D.
Rebecca, we did get one question asking where they can find the guidelines that includes these updates that we're currently going over.
They are not online yet. We weren't able to get them remediated in time for today's meeting. And so I sent out an email through Constant Contact, but if you're not on that list, you wouldn't receive that email. So after today's workshop, if you leave your email address, I can send them to you directly. And then we'll hopefully get these up and remediated by next week. On the website. Oh, next week, worst case scenario. It's usually a lot faster than that. Any other questions, Alika?
None at this time. Thanks, Rebecca.
And then so the last one, D.
Rebecca, can you attach the document to this no?
No, I don't.
Okay.
I don't think so. Yeah, go to webinar had some bells and whistles that I don't think Zoom is capable of.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm so sorry, everyone. Oh, and the last one, D, right. And so again, this is another SB 198 requirement that projects funded through the LTCAP demonstrate that they have incorporated environmental equity, protect underserved and vulnerable communities, and provide meaningful benefits to underserved communities, consistent with the California State Adaptation Strategy. And this requirement that we added, hopefully to give applicants a little bit more understanding and structure to how to answer this. And so if you go to that adaptation strategy, there are 6 priorities of the strategy, and each strategy has, or each priority has a goal. So all we're asking applicants is just to identify the priority and associated goal that the project nomination closely aligns with. There are no questions here. We can scroll on. We're going to skip to page 14, which is, it'll be one of the last questions for the evaluation criteria. And here we just clarified some of the language. And so based on the climate vulnerable or disadvantaged communities that applicants identified in the screening criteria, all of question D will be answered based upon those communities. So the first, we just clarified the language, really, no major changes. But the first question, describe the public stakeholders who were engaged in the development of the project nomination. And then the second question, describe the process used to identify the community's mobility needs. And here we added this part of the sentence, and explain how the proposed project will address those mobility needs. So we want to make sure that the disadvantaged or climate vulnerable communities that are identified and supporting the project nomination, they have been incorporated into the planning process, and that those needs of the community not only were documented, but incorporated into the project nomination. And then the third question, there's a tiny little bit of purple. Before we had describe the public outreach and engagement, but now we have describe and provide documentation of the public outreach and engagement. So that concludes the changes for section 14. We do have some for the next page for section 15, page 15. Last stakeholder meeting, scroll down a little bit more, Lika, because A and B are sort of the same beast. Perfect. So at the last stakeholder meeting, when we presented this, stakeholders had reacted and they were concerned that scoring solely on the reduction of greenhouse gases or vehicle miles traveled might disadvantage some projects that maybe don't have any elements for reduction of greenhouse gases. One of our stakeholders last time, and I don't remember the name, but they said, you know, what if we had a fish passage? What if we were just creating a fish passage? We wouldn't be able to score for this question. And so we have some proposed language that we hope will alleviate that concern. So I'm going to read just the whole thing. Reduction of greenhouse gases, describe how the proposed project will reduce the greenhouse gas emissions, criteria, pollutants, and advance California's air quality and climate goals. What we've added is, if the project will not reduce greenhouse gases, applicants must explain why greenhouse gas reduction strategies were not considered within the project nomination, and projects that do not increase greenhouse gas emissions, criteria, pollutants, and advance California's air quality and climate goals may be scored higher. And that same language was also applied to reduction of vehicle miles traveled. So asking applicants to explain why VMT reduction strategies may not have been incorporated into the project. And we wanted to communicate that projects that do not increase VMT may be scored higher. We can skip down quite a ways to page 27, Alika, please. So here, there look like a lot of changes, but really just more clarifications for what we want to see from the application package. And so fact sheet, 1 to 2 page fact sheet describing the project and benefits. The fact sheet should also include a brief description of the climate threat's impact to the transportation infrastructure and resulting impacts to those disadvantaged climate vulnerable communities connected to the project nomination. Scroll down, Alika, a little bit, next page. For the project scope, we added some language just clarifying what that would be. So nothing too important to highlight here. Scroll down a little bit to the map requirement. So we do want maps, or at least a map associated with the project nomination. The map should include the boundaries of the proposed project or the project location with applicable neighborhood, city, and county boundaries, the geographic boundaries and access points of the climate vulnerable, underserved, or under-resourced community that's connected to the project. So we want to see where those communities are at in connection to the project and the ingress and egress to that community as well. Destinations that the proposed project is benefiting, which is asked for in the project evaluation narrative in section 14, sorry. So hopefully not onerous. And then maps should have a scale bar and a legend. Lastly, photos. Photos have always been asked for as a requirement, but with a stipulation that if the project location has experienced a climate event related to the project nomination, so in the project nomination, the agency identified extreme heat as being the climate stressor, and the project location has experienced extreme heat before, and the agency has photos to share, we would love to see those included in the project nomination package. Scroll down, please, Alika, to page 34. And here, so we're out of the guidelines, we're in the appendices. There's no purple on this page, but I wanted to let everyone be aware. There used to be 3 tools for climate data. One of them was really more of a document and wasn't really a tool. And so all we did was we took that out and we put it in our references, Appendix F section. And so the climate tools that are allowable for this program will be CalAdapt and the Our Coast, Our Future hazard map, which utilizes sea level rise data from the USGS. Scroll down, Alika, to the next page, 35. So in the screening criteria that we covered in section 12, we talked about how Justice 40 will need to, in order to comply with Justice 40, applicants will need to use the federal tool to determine if the disadvantaged community in connection to the project is recognized as being federally disadvantaged. So we wanted to make this easier for everyone. The climate tool, or the climate tools, the tools for this question are provided here for everyone. So if you scroll down a little bit, Alika, everyone can see the federal screening. There's 2 different tools you can choose from. The first was developed by the Biden administration for Justice 40, and the one underneath was developed by US DOT to comply with Justice 40 and protect requirements. And this is more of a transportation related screening tool. However, both are allowable. So applicants may use either one to indicate whether their project meets the federal thresholds for disadvantaged communities. The same applies if you scroll a little bit down, Alika, to the state screening. So this is where we also want applicants to indicate whether their project meets the state thresholds for climate vulnerable, disadvantaged, et cetera. These are all of the ways and means that applicants can demonstrate meeting those thresholds. So no changes there. And the only other last change, if you scroll to page, excuse me.
We actually ended up getting 2 questions in. Did
good.
you want to address those now?
Yeah, go ahead, that's fine.
Okay, so we got one question from April Webster asking, how would this criteria impact complete streets projects?
Which criteria? I'm so sorry.
Let's see. I believe this question came in when we were talking about, might have been Appendix C. I'll wait for April to clarify that. In the meantime, maybe we can address the other question.
Yeah.
This is from Jennifer Holman asking, what does may be scored higher mean? How will that be determined?
That's a good question. So section 13, we didn't go over it because there weren't any changes, but for the LTCAP, evaluations will be conducted using a low, medium low, medium high, or high scoring system. And so maybe scored higher would be, I'm trying to think of how to say this, depending on the project, on the project nomination and application, the amount of, or like the quality of narrative to demonstrate that the project, you know, wouldn't be increasing any VMT because of alternative strategies, let's say. So, and there's a lot of robust information and narrative to support that. That is why we say maybe scored higher. And also to encourage applicants to find or implement GHG and VMT reduction strategies. Teresa, I saw you came off mute. Did you want to jump in at all?
I actually muted myself. I was unmuted and I just realized it, sorry.
Okay. Jennifer ended up sending a follow-up response saying, so all things being equal, they would definitely be scored lower.
I'm so, I think I'm confused, Jennifer. I'm so sorry. What would be scored lower?
Jennifer, I'm going to unmute you. It might be easier to just talk regarding your question.
Sorry, this is Jennifer Holman from OPR. I was just trying to figure out what may meant. It's just a little bit vague. Like we might think about it or we might not. Or so I was just trying to figure out, does that mean would if all things would otherwise be equal, or is that just completely discretionary?
Rebecca, which part exactly are we talking about?
Sorry, let's scroll up as a group. We're talking about page 15.
Thank you. That's very amazing that you remember exactly where it is.
I've stared at these for months.
Yeah, she's very familiar with these guidelines. Oh, it's on this part?
Yes. Okay.
So you and I actually talked about this. You remember we talked about her exact question. So, okay. Maybe projects that do not increase vehicle miles traveled may be scored higher. I think that, Rebecca, I think part of the thing is because we don't know what kind of projects that we're going to get. It's hard to know exactly how to evaluate them as a whole, I guess. So, you know, we were talking about if it's a project that is just putting in a riprap or something, then it's not going to increase, but it's probably not going to decrease either.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, does that, it should not get penalized for not a decreasing GHG, but it's but if we get a project that does have a substantial decrease, that may score higher. It's hard to say.
Yeah, I can see that, but that's why I was asking if the two projects were equivalent, then the one that reduced it would definitely get more points.
Yes. Yeah.
I wouldn't say definitely, because
well,
we
said definitely
may.
not definitely, because
that's what my question was. Okay, so it seems to be completely discretionary is what you're saying.
Okay. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, no, I do believe it just depends on the project. Because, so for example, a culvert, if they're putting culverts that are going to a larger culvert, that's really not going to impact GHG or VMT. But if we have a project that is going to increase greenhouse gas, that may impact the score on the project based on this. So we cannot, because some may be applicable and some may not. That's really the only reason why we have a may, because a project that increases VMT or decreases VMT, then it's going to have to be evaluated. A project that is neutral is really not. That's kind of how we were seeing this.
Jennifer, does that answer your question?
No, but that's okay. We can move on.
Okay. Well, feel free to re-ask it if you want. We schedule this till 4, so we have a lot of time. But in the meantime, I guess we can keep going. Alika, there was
yeah, so there was April's question. So she did end up providing some clarification. She said, I was wondering how green and complete streets projects might be scored using VMT and greenhouse gases. Would projects that add a bioswale or rain garden or green protected bike lane qualify?
Yeah, so if I had that application in front of me and we were looking at the scoring rubric, this project would get, well, I've been a part of a lot of application scoring committees, and you would have a project that would seem to be a slam dunk, but there would be almost no supporting narrative, right? There would be, we want to put in a bike lane because they're super neat. That project isn't going to get a high score, right? Yes, they are super neat, but why is it super neat? We want to see the planning work. We want to see the conscientious community engagement and incorporation of feedback, right? So projects that demonstrate that all of those components have been satisfied in the creation and in the future implementation of this project, that is what drives sort of like a high score. Making sure that applicants, answer that question in full. Lori, did you want to add?
Yeah, I was trying to understand her question better.
I think what April's trying to say is like, does everyone get like and April, please, we can take you off mute too if you're still muted.
If she could get off mute, that would probably be helpful.
Hi, yes. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, hi, April.
Yeah, I was just trying to understand. So there are some projects I think might qualify for this program that would be, could potentially lead to a reduction in VMT, but it isn't a slam dunk and not really clear. And I think, some of these green complete streets projects that are starting to pop up to address not only active transportation and complete streets, but also address some, help improve climate resiliency by, dealing with flooding and drought, and also heat island effects. It's not clear to me how, if you were creating a project to apply for this program, it would get scored based on that scoring rubric that asked for how VMT or GHG would be reduced. I was just wondering if it wasn't clear if there was a little bit of wiggle room for identifying some other sort of metric, or maybe there was a free-form bit.
Yeah. So in the language we added, because we heard this last time, what if we don't reduce VMT, or what if we can't quantify that? And so the language we added, projects, if the project will not reduce greenhouse gases, all we would like to see from applicants is why that is not feasible, or wasn't added. So earlier example was like a fish passage. If you're constructing a fish passage that won't affect GHG or VMT, that's fine. But just having applicants answer that,
address it at least.
To at least address it, and let I was gonna say the evaluators, when the time comes to evaluate the applications, letting the evaluators know that this was something that was considered and kicked around by the planning team or whomever, so that VMT and GHG reduction is at the forefront of applicants' minds.
So Rebecca, I think April's question relates directly back to the last question, because the examples that April is bringing up are exactly why it's hard, why you have that may in here. Because like the bioswale, I don't know if you could say a bioswale is reducing GHG, or if you could show that somehow, but that may be a really excellent project. We don't know, because this is the first time that we've gotten these projects. So I think that's why we're trying to give ourselves enough leeway in the scoring, and not lock ourselves down into scoring in one thing or another when we're not sure the types of projects we'll be getting.
Yes, agreed to what Lori said. I've been scoring some other types of state projects for active transportation projects, and have run into that when you're looking at the scoring rubric. So, when you have, I don't know if this is done for scoring these projects, but when it goes out to community members or part of the industry as a team to help evaluate them, when you're trying to figure out how to use the rubric, it can be somewhat difficult if it only identifies those two scoring mechanisms, and it doesn't clearly state that, not just that they address it, but that there could be a third criteria that they use and how they're considering this, because there are a lot of projects, starting to move away from VMT as a way of evaluating active transportation projects. It's not as critical for seeing this, modality shift. And so I think there could be room for one more, and I don't know what it would be, to be honest, but one more scoring item in there to address these other types of projects that could have huge impact on the climate, but don't sort of fit into the traditional ways of thinking about how we're, introducing climate resiliency.
Yeah, and Rebecca, this is on the additional criteria, correct?
Yeah, correct.
Okay, so the main criteria, and then there's this other criteria that I think is can be used to enhance a scoring, I guess, without it being a main scoring. Does that make sense?
And could I add to that? Could it be possible maybe in this other to provide some examples of what might be other types of projects that score well? That might help evaluators, give them a bit more direction. Just a thought.
That's a really good thought, April. I'm trying to think about how we could do that without having examples to draw from. That's the only issue. Because with this being the first cycle, we really don't know what we're going to get or what project components will look like
Could there be something that you point to as, I don't know, I guess it is a bit late. Thinking too.
You know, let's kind of think about this a little bit more, because it may not be necessary. We can maybe, if applicable, would that be, because not all projects is going to be applicable. So let us kind of huddle internally, and then maybe we can send something out when Rebecca sends another draft to everyone, just based on the conversation. Would that be okay?
Works for me. Thank you.
Thank you, April.
We've gotten a couple other questions that have come in. We have one from Christine Mohana asking, what if my project is safe routes to school? Then we increase students biking and walking to school, which is reduction of greenhouse gases and reduction of VMT. Should I be able to get 2 points?
So we're not points based like the ATP, but otherwise, yeah. So like something like that, a project element or a project nomination that has safe routes to school, kids biking to school, that would show a reduction of GHG, and so applicants can respond to that and then support their narrative with any evidence, GHG calculator, or what, however is the best way to demonstrate that the project would indeed reduce GHG or VMT.
Okay, great. And then she followed up asking or stating, I think adding bioswales will help in photosynthesis and help convert more CO2 gas to oxygen. So is photosynthesis led to reduction of GHG gases?
That's very technical. I would say that this program, Protect, allows for natural infrastructure elements to be utilized in any of those 3 main buckets of activities. So resilience, evacuation, community resilience, and at risk coastal infrastructure. So if there's any natural elements that are being used in the project, that it is an allowable activity. But I guess what we could add, along with the same vein that April had mentioned earlier, maybe we would have reduction of GHG, VMT, maybe if applicable, and then system resilience or natural infrastructure elements scoring criteria, since it is allowable and encouraged under Protect. Teresa or Lori, any thoughts about maybe adding something to give applicants a boost for adding that green infrastructure?
That's a thought. I think that's not a bad idea. So I think that's another one that we can really think about.
Yeah, and I think the way that was described, I mean, I think that would be an excellent way to respond to that question. Don't you think, Rebecca?
Yeah, sorry, I can't see the chat. Was it Christine's question?
Yes.
The bioswales, yes.
Correct.
Thank you. Yeah, we will add something in section 15, which is the additional evaluation criteria to look at system resilience elements.
Perfect, thanks. And then we also have Mike Woodman with his hand raised. Mike, you should be able to unmute yourself now.
Thanks, Rebecca. This is Mike with NCTC. Appreciate the discussion kind of on the flexibility in addressing these, because given the different project types that are eligible for this program, and thinking about, project types related to the community safety and evacuation, you know, whether it's an ITS element or you're adding shoulders that could be used for, you know, evacuation, egress, kind of a contraflow. You know, those kind of things may not reduce greenhouse gas emissions, you know, probably neutral. And then reduction of VMT, again, probably neutral or negligible. And then, you know, transportation, land use, and housing goals, you know, when you're talking about community evacuation, you can kind of link it back to the general plan, hazard mitigation plan, those type of things. But all of these aren't necessarily, you know, a clean fit depending on the different eligible project types. So just appreciate the discussion on flexibility and taking that into consideration.
Thank you, Mike. I appreciate that.
Okay. I'm not seeing any other hands raised or questions.
Okay. The last thing I wanted to point out was, it's very, very minor. Page 39, Alika. No, so sorry, page 38. The SB 198 requirements that the projects funded through LTCAP need to be consistent with the number of documents. In the additional resources, we added the climate action plan, climate adaptation plan sort of documents and what those are. And those would be allowable to incorporate into the narrative for any of the goal. Oh, scroll down a little bit, Alika. There we go, it's purple. So we just added that for your convenience or assistance. Hopefully it helps. But that concludes all of the changes made to the guidelines. Not a lot of changes, but substantial changes.
Rebecca, I might have missed it. Did you go over the that the program could fund all phases?
No, we didn't. We need to go to page, I never remember what page that's on. So sorry, everyone. Oh, there we go. We skipped it. Page 17. Scroll down to the bottom half of the page. And right there, right above the bulleted list. So the prior, thank you, Lori, for reminding me. I totally skipped over this.
It's section 16, right?
Yes, section 16, page 17, the bottom half. We had language before that said the commission may program LTCAP funds to all phases of a capital project. We've changed that to any phase of a capital project and added a caveat underneath that bulleted list that says an applicant may request funding for all phases of a capital project with an explanation of how the project will meet the timely use of funds requirements as outlined in section 23. Given the tight timeline for the project, or for the project, sorry, for the program and the allocation deadlines, we realized that not all phases could probably be programmed depending on the project type. So we wanted to make that clarification and add in the requirement for applicants to explain how their projects would meet the timely use of funds if they're requesting funding for all phases of the project. And then there's also language in here that just lets everyone know that receiving and utilizing federal funds makes the applicant beholden to provisions of the federal code for the expenditure of those funds. And so we added in that paragraph here to direct applicants to Caltrans Division of Local Assistance Procedures Manual that has all of the information needed for that federal funding and compliance with the requirements of federal funding. Are there any questions about this? Mike? Ah, I saw a hand. Sorry, Lika.
No worries, Mike, go ahead.
Thanks, Rebecca. This is Mike with NCTC. Just a quick question. I think at the beginning of the presentation, you indicated that eligible projects must be located on the federal aid system. Is that correct?
Yes, correct.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? That was the last change that Lori had pointed out that we'd skipped.
We can wait another couple seconds here. I'm not seeing any hands raised or questions coming in at this point.
Okay. While we wait, if there are any questions, we want to let everyone know we will be presenting the final draft to the commission during the May meeting, which is scheduled for May 17th and 18th in San Francisco. And I believe today, Lori, we're not just holding, we're not just presenting them for adoption, but we'll be holding a hearing as well.
Yes, there will be a hearing to take any final comments or questions and for any discussion, and then adoption right after.
Any questions? Did anything come through? Because if not, I think we might be reaching the end of our workshop.
We had one question come in asking, when will the next draft be available?
As soon as possible. So today we're going to take your feedback that we heard, make some proposed changes, and then we will send them out. If you did not get an email from me around noon or 11:30 today, that means I don't have your contact information in our constant contact. So please do email me your full name and your email at least. So then I can add you to the constant contact database, and then you'll get the latest draft as soon as we have that ready for you.
Perfect. And we have one other question that came in asking, what's the final date for updates to this document?
At the commission meeting, so May 17th, I believe.
Yes, you're correct. And the purpose of adding a hearing is for additional public comment. If anybody has additional comments that could be made at the time of the hearings before adoption of the document.
Thank you, Teresa.
It looks like Mike has another comment. Mike, go ahead.
Thanks, Rebecca. Sorry, it just dawned on me. We've had discussions prior, at prior workshops, the issue's been raised. How can we be kind of strategic with Caltrans Protect program and the CTC's local climate adaptation program to kind of align the timing of the two so we can be strategic about funding requests in both funding pots? Has there been any action on that front in working with the department?
There has. The direction we received from the department is please reach out to your Caltrans district and they will let you know what projects have been augmented with those Protect funds. Sorry, Mike, that's not much of an answer, but that's what we've been able to get.
Okay, interesting answer from the department. All right.
Well, Mike, it has a lot to do with the tight schedule So the department has a strategy as to how they are going to utilize the funds, unlike our program, that it is a competitive program. And so they have a different strategy. So it would be very difficult for us to align because of the differences. But we do encourage you to reach out to Caltrans and find out what their strategy is and how they're going to be implementing those funds.
Yeah, because it would just be, important, because if we knew in advance of your program what the department was proposing for funding, that could change what we're proposing for funding in your program.
Yep, I agree with you, but yeah.
I know it's out of your control, but
yeah, reach out to your district. I think that is your best bet for now.
Okay, thank you.
And any last questions, Alika, that came in at all?
I'm not seeing any other questions or hands raised.
Okay. Well, we are very much ahead of schedule. So if there are no further questions, we can wrap this up. And again, if you didn't get an email from me or from Constant Contact at around 11:30, please drop your name and your email in the chat box so I can collect that information, add you to the Constant Contact. And then as soon as we get these changes incorporated in the next day or two, look out for an email through that Constant Contact. And then you'll be able to see the latest changes on the draft. And then once we have those, we'll also send them out for remediation so they can be posted on our website, and they will be posted to the LTCAP program page. So I want to thank everyone today for the discussion and your attendance. I really appreciate it. The guidelines would not have been this far if not for all of the stakeholders. So thank you very much. Any departing words from anyone before we adjourn?
I just wanted to point out, April, I know you noted that the chat was disabled, so you weren't able to include your email. I just enabled it, so you should be able to at this point. My apologies on that.
Okay, well, thank you so much, everyone. Have a great rest of your day, and hope to see or hear from you later at the commission meeting. And if you want to register for the meeting, please go to the CTC's website. Take care, everyone.